Mr. Airlangga continues to retain his ministership, and of course that is a sign that Golkar is in favor with the government, with the president, and of course that helps to boost its image.
This is episode 2 of Indonesia In-Depth podcast. We are very lucky today to have an important and distinguished guest. His name is Mr. Marzuki Darusman. For those of you who are not familiar with Mr. Marzuki, he is a lawyer and a senior member of the Golkar party, which is the second largest political party in Indonesia. He has served as chair of the Indonesian National Human Rights Commission, as well as serving as Attorney General. In 2009, he was appointed by the UN Secretary General to a UN Commission of Inquiry to investigate the assassination of the former Pakistani Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto. In 2010, he was assigned to serve as chair of the UN Secretary General's panel of experts on Sri Lanka, and later he was a member of the Commission of Inquiry on Human Rights in North Korea. And now he is currently the chairman of the UN Independent Fact-Finding Team for Myanmar to investigate the Rohingya situation and the accusations of acts of genocide in the northern Rakhine state. Mr. Marzuki, thank you for being on this episode of Indonesia In-Depth.
My pleasure.
I want to talk about developments since President Widodo took office in 2014 and where things are headed. This is President Widodo's third year in office. He came into office lacking a strong grasp of the national political dynamics, which was clearly evident in his first year in office. Many in his cabinet outmaneuvered him at that time, and there was a lot of infighting in the cabinet. How do you see President Widodo evolving since then, and what do you see as his biggest accomplishments to date?
Yes, well, I think the general sense is that he's done well in terms of establishing his authority as leader, and I would agree with that. There was a time when people thought that because of the way he had won the elections on the basis of so many parties and interests supporting him, that he would be in debt to many of these groups, which would then slow down his initiatives because of crisscrossing of so many differing focus, that it might even affect the stability of the presidency. But then what has happened is that he's been able to emerge as, I think, the person in government that has the last say on almost anything now. And he has, I think, very skillfully used the platform of the presidency as the final arbiter of policy to converge everything onto his office, and therefore use that as a tool or as a means of consolidating his position.
So the president has consolidated his power and is now trying to make up for lost time during the beginning of his term.
That much is clear to political public, and looking ahead, of course, it's a matter of looking how he's able to maintain this. And I think the public understands that some of his programs may have been delayed because of the initial couple of years of consolidating power. But then, as of now, the expectations are higher that he has a lot to catch up with on especially infrastructure projects and getting the things done that he's promised during the president election.
It is now 2018, and it seems that all eyes are on the upcoming 171 regional elections in June. How will this impact the government and the political environment going forward?
So 2018, I think, is going to be a very interesting year. It will be a transitional year, of course, towards the next presidential election. The downside, of course, is that election season is coming quite early this time, because there's so much speculation on the next elections in 2019. But the expectation, of course, is that if things take their course as the way they are now, he would have a fair chance of being re-elected. unless there's a sudden development that might hold things up. The downside, as I mentioned, would be that the whole year would be perhaps shortened in the sense that government will only be working for another 6 months till maybe August or September, and then that's where the election processes kick in there.
The president seems to be betting it all on infrastructure projects for his re-election. Do you think it'll pay off?
I think the president knows that much hinges on what he is able to achieve up until the end, so that he becomes credible as an incumbent that merited another term. But all in all, I think if things continue the way they are, I don't see any immediate crisis in looming. The internal situation, I think, is well managed. There might be attempts to destabilize the situation on the basis of some of the visible populist movements. But if the general mood holds like this, then there will be, of course, ups and downs. But all in all, I think the president has managed to overcome the more critical aspects of his leadership.
President Widodo now has a strong ally in the military with the appointment of the new Armed Forces Chief, and he has a strong ally in the Golkar Party. These are both significant.
The armed forces are now fully in line with his policies. The political parties are now competing against each other for primacy in the next election. So, in fact, he would be a factor that could impact on the fortunes of political parties. And I think what they're looking at is how all these parties would be able to claim advantage in supporting the president in his re-election. And therefore, I think the immediate concern of parties is to get the best approval rating as much as possible within the coming 6 months, so that whoever ends up in the three major parties will then be able to start negotiating who would be the best party to support Mr. Jokowi.
Back in 2014, the president came into power and was heavily reliant on PDIP and the chairwoman Megawati. Things have changed, haven't they?
He's clearly in charge, and he is able, I think, to decide which party he would favor supporting him. So he's in that position. He's in an ideal position at the moment. I think political party knows that. You know.
President Widodo has become very close to Golkar now, and also has a close relationship with Golkar's new chairman, Erlangga Hartarto. The party is attempting to recreate its public image now. How do you see this relationship going forward as we move towards 2019?
Well, the changes in Golkar, I think, have helped to get the public's attention again on Golkar, because there's always been this hope put on Golkar as a party that goes back into history and has a track record of taking the lead on economics and development, and therefore, if with the changes in place now, I think in a month we'll know the whole lineup. That would, I think, will allow the party to profile itself in a new light with the public. And of course, if Mr. Erlangga continues to retain his ministership, then of course that is a sign that Golkar is in favor with the government, with the president, and of course that helps to boost its image. This is a momentum in itself, unexpected. It has great potential in projecting Golkar within the higher brackets of the approved ratings. Yeah?
Do you think the president will keep the Golkar Party chairman, Erlangga Hartarto, as the Minister of Industry? As you recall, back in 2014, the president said he wanted a professional cabinet and required all members to relinquish senior positions in political parties. Do you think the president will provide an exemption for Airlangga on this?
Yeah, I think that's the general sense that people in Golkar have, that Airlangga will continue as minister, because that's the only element that gives him advantage against the other contenders for the chairmanship. Of course, it's a presidential prerogative to set the policy on doubling up as chairman and minister in the cabinet.
If Airlangga is replaced, could that turn into a total reconfiguration of the cabinet and sort of spin out of control? What happens to the cabinet if Airlangga is replaced?
If he lets Airlangga go, then of course he will have to realign the whole cabinet again, and that has its drawbacks. I don't think there's been any voices against this for the moment. Yeah, so I think it's safe to say that he would retain his ministership for the moment.
Can you speak a little bit about Parliament and how Golkar's party, under the former chairman Setia Novanto, who was also Speaker of the House, was very supportive of the government since they joined the coalition in 2016. Will there be any changes in the House when it comes to supporting the government, seeing there's a new House Speaker and also a new chairman of the Golkar party?
Well, the nature of Golkar has always been that it's a government-supporting party. I think the basic line will continue, and that is to manage things in a way that maintains a close relationship between Parliament and the government. There's no contest on the chairmanship being allocated to Golkar. So it's more of an internal issue within the party. But I think they will want to make sure that whoever becomes the speaker and the chairman of the faction are all aligned to the basic policy of Golkar being supportive of the president, because that's a party manifesto in supporting President Jokowi for his re-election in 2019. So the line has been drawn already, and so one would expect that anyone who replaces the former speaker is going to be someone that understands that while Parliament may have to be seen as independent of the government, but then again, collaboration between these two institutions are crucial in bringing the economy forward, and then seeing to it that politics are more or less stable.
So you don't expect any changes with Golkar's support in Parliament towards the government's programs and policies?
That's the sense that people have. So it's everything will just will be settled in a way in the coming 1 or 2 months, maybe even sooner. Then the parties will then gear up for the president elections and the general elections. I think the next big agenda is perhaps to find who the running mate could be. I think the general sense is there that well, if the president intends to continue, which of course is clear, that he might want to pick a different running mate this time.
Could Widodo's next VP running mate potentially come from Golkar?
That running mate could potentially come from Golkar, but it could be a bipartisan choice with the other big parties, maybe PDIP, most probably. Less so, I think, if it's from Gerindra. Because at the end, I think these are the two parties that really matter, PDIP and Golkar. To a certain extent, the historic party PPP brings the moderate Islam element into the governing.
Some observers saw the Jakarta election in 2017 as a barometer of secularism in Indonesia, and we saw a move towards political Islam during that election. Do you see that potentially happening in the 2018 regional elections in places such as West Java, which have traditionally been more conservative?
Well, this is a question that's no less important than the previous ones, but I think this is something that commands attention from the international community. I wouldn't be too worried about the Jakarta elections being a barometer. the so-called Sharia vote has always been limited to a less than 15% of the overall national vote. Yeah? So we'll have to see if there's any impact from the Jakarta elections on the general elections. If the 2019 elections show that the so-called Sharia vote starts creeping up to 15%, then we might have to take another look at it. But in the meantime, it's anyone's guess how the outcome is going to be. And so it's overly speculated that Jakarta is going to be the barometer. No, Jakarta is not the barometer. In that sense, yeah? It never has been, because Golkar has not really fared too well in Jakarta, in spite of the fact that it's a party for development, and Jakarta is the most urbanized city in Indonesia. You'd expect that Golkar would be winning all the time there, but it's not the case. So it's still out. The jury is still out on that. And in a way, I think even if it moves up a bit, it doesn't really mean anything in that sense, because this is a really pluralistic country, and it's been the case since the very beginning.
There's a lot to watch in 2018, so we'll keep an eye on it. Thank you for your time, Marzuki Darusman, and thank you for being on Indonesia In-Depth Podcast.
My pleasure.